Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, welcome to With Jewish Youth. And you know, it's such a wonderful thing to get a barrage of mail and telephone calls where people express their appreciation for a certain show. Now, you know, in an interview show, you can't always be tops. You can't always put it across the way you would like to. But certain shows seems that just go off different than others and with more success and bring about a bigger popular response than others. You will recall that last week we had the publisher and editor of the Allgemeine Journal, Gershon Jacobson, as my guest on the air. Now, I must tell you that the response to this show was so fantastic that this is, I think, the first time that I have ever had an encore for an interviewee because of popular request. And so tonight, the 16th, and Emir Hashem, this coming Monday, we're going to have Gershon Jacobson as our guest once again on With Jewish Youth in order to give him an opportunity to tell of some of his experiences and to tell more about the interesting world of a newspaper publisher, especially in Yiddish. And incidentally, let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, in my audience. Time magazine and the New York Times are now in the midst of preparing a story about the Allgemeine Journal. The reason is, it seems that they are fascinated that in an era when newspapers are dying, because of the various problems that they encounter, there is a Yiddish newspaper that is marking up a remarkable success story. Through its growth, it's prospering, it's coming into more and more areas, more and more countries throughout the world, and they are indeed exceptionally excited about this. You know, this is their business, and they are very happy to see newspapers or magazines or the like, or any other literary work, prosper and grow as the Allgemeine Journal has been doing in the short time of its existence. All that I could say to Gershon Jacobson is more power to you, and may God be with you so that your success story should continue to ring out throughout the world. Anyway, Gershon, welcome back to With Jewish Youth. It's certainly wonderful to have you with us once again in our studio, and I know that we're in for another interesting evening to hear some of the exciting stories that a man like you who has gone through a world. I know that you've been to Egypt, and you've been to Russia, and you've been to the Vatican, and you've been all over the place. And I think we can hear from you the kind of stories that we couldn't hear from anyone else and perhaps not even read in another newspaper. But before we do that, I want to ask you one thing. Tell me, to what do you attribute the success of your newspaper?
Rabbi Hecht, before I tell you or I give you an answer to your question about the success and the growth of the Allgemeine Journal, I want to tell you a little episode that happened since our last interview. I got 2 calls which perhaps would also answer a question that's raised by many. How does an interview with a newspaper man, with an editor, fit into a program which is devoted to Jewish youth, with Jewish youth, the way you call it? So let me tell you, apparently you have a lot of young Jews listening to the program, following it. The next morning, we had our last talk, I believe, on Tuesday evening. On Wednesday morning, at 9:30 or so, I get a call from a young man by the name of Rubin, who is attending Columbia University, School of Journalism, and he simply asked me whether there is a job available. That's number one. Number 2 was a call from a lady who graduated Brandeis University 2 years ago, and who is working in a major ladies journal here in New York, who followed the program, and who is an editor and a newspaper woman. And she said to me she's Jewish, although she's coming from a very assimilated home, but trying to build her future and her philosophy. She felt that she would like also professionally work in a Jewish environment. And the best would be, the way she thought it, would to work in a Jewish newspaper. She asked me if any type of a job is available. She doesn't care whether she's a proofreader, a copy reader, a copywriter, an advertising girl, whatever job there is, but she wants to work in a Jewish publication. She doesn't care, she said, how much money she's making. She would like just to make a bare minimum that would be enough to sustain. But primarily, she wanted to find her Jewish heritage, her Jewish way of life, by working in a Jewish publication. So these were two specific results, two calls that I received after the call. And another one, which was very interesting, was from a very prominent New York Reform rabbi, one of the largest Reform congregations, who is American-born, who told me he's listening to the program every evening. It is very stimulating to him, although he doesn't agree with many things that is being promoted on the program. And he found it very interesting, and being a friend, he called me up, he complimented me, he complimented you. So I thought this was remarkable, besides other letters and other calls I received, because I happened to have appeared quite on a number of programs, including just recently on educational television, Channel 13. So, and I must say that WVD and With the Youth, Rabbi Hecht's program, does not stand back in reactions from a wide variety of people that one receives. Now, replying to your question on the remarkable growth of the Allgemeine Journal, indeed, I'm very proud of the growth. I'm proud and I'm fascinated because I have been working many years in Jewish publications. I worked in the National Jewish Post and Opinion as the New York bureau chief back in the 50s. I worked as a reporter in the Jewish Day before it died, demised, in December 1971. I was the city editor at one time. I was connected to many other publications as a contributor, editor, and so forth. I must say that the growth of the Allgemeiner is something really unusual. It's unusual, first of all, that in such short of time, 2.5 years, that the paper reaches such a wide variety of readers. Real national readership, from Los Angeles to Toronto, to New York, Miami, Atlanta, Georgia, and so forth. And the quality of people. And the quality is not only the type of people that read it, but the influence that they control. It's known that in the United States a great deal of Jewish life is controlled by rabbis, by educators, by people who deal with the spiritual fabric of American Jewish life and its quality. And when these people subscribe to the paper, read it, and they don't read it because they like Gershon Jacobson or they are admirers of the Yiddish language. They read the paper because they must read it, and they say so. They subscribe to it, they pay $20 a year, they send in the check every year, some of them even for 3 or 4 years in advance. Rabbis tell me they must have the paper to prepare their sermons, because it's up to date, it gives you a very wide variety of what's going on. For instance, to give you an example, there was a convention last week of the conservative rabbinical group called Rabbinical Assembly. And I must say a number of news media, Jewish news media, covered the convention. The main point, the most significant event of the convention, nobody mentioned, only after we reported it. And this is that for the first time, 3 rabbis were expelled from the Rabbinical Assembly. The New York Post picked it up 2 days after we had it. But this happened right there. It's not something that we had to find out. This was a public meeting of almost 1,000 rabbis. Conservative rabbis are expelling a rabbi from Chicago who performed a mixed marriage. And even according to the rules and regulations of the conservative, the rabbi cannot do it. And they expelled him. And 2 other rabbis were expelled for more technical reasons. But to give you an example, the mere fact that such a thing happens, rabbis in Atlanta, Georgia, or in Atlantic City, or in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, or New York City have no other way to know it except from that newspaper. And we covered it and we had it. Or for instance, you take on the issue on who is a Jew, we discussed it last time. The Union of Orthodox Rabbis, the Agudas Rabbonim, which is the most prestigious rabbinical national group of the older generation of American rabbis, covered in our newspaper with a front page account to the effect that any compromises, any suggestions that there could be found in halacha, which is Jewish law, a more compromising approach which would avoid the specific rules and regulations of conversions of non-Jews, of Gentiles to Judaism, is not acceptable. It has to be a halacha. This is the whole question, by the way, in Israel. Where was it covered? Not in the JTA, not in other Anglo-Jewish publications. It was front page, including a statement by the famed Talmudic scholar Rabbi Soloveitchik, of course Rabbi Feinstein, Rabbi Elberg, and the others. To give you just an example of last week's issue, I have an unusual column written on the portion of the week, the Sedre von der Woche, by Dr. Hillel Zeidman, which is a must for 99% of rabbis to be read, because he takes the portion of the week, he interprets it in a very interesting manner, and it's read. The coverage from Israel by a man like David Flinker, the columns by Nissim Gordon, who is well known for many years, Shlomo Shamir, Aaron Alperin, Tovia Isaacs. We have, for instance, now, since it's summertime, and it's the time when Jews customarily study or read the Pirkei Avot, the sayings of the sages, we have a column on that, taken out from famous scholars, rabbis, what they say about different portions of the Pirkei Avot. We Jews like to read. They don't find it in the New York Times, they don't find it in Time Magazine or NBC or CBS. And I think the editorial content is a great deal, tells a great deal about the growth of the paper, the complete freedom of the press. We have letters, opinions, views from the most... something interesting just happened yesterday to me. A man writes to me from Chicago. He says he is a Yiddish poet. He arrived from Russia 3 months ago. He lives in a hotel. What do you do? He says to me, he studies English. And he would like to write an article for the newspaper. And what's the article about? He says for 12 years he worked as the proofreader and a member of the staff of the only Yiddish communist Jewish publication in Moscow called Sovietisch Heimland. And he has very many secrets about what's going on inside this publication. Now this is very hot. This is almost like the Pentagon Papers for the New York Times or the transcripts of the White House as far as Jewish life goes, because here is Russia. It's publishing a monthly literary magazine called Sovietisch Heimland, and here is a man who was for 11 years a member of the staff, who left Russia, and he offers his manuscript, his story, to our newspaper. And so it's not only a newspaper sensation. Of course, I grabbed it from him, and it's going to be published in our edition of Erev Shavuot of the 24th of May. He tells there a very interesting story, which is, I think, the Tzad HaShaveh, the same approach to Jewish life and Yiddishkeit that you find in Russia and in the Soviet Union. And this is that even inside the hierarchy of communism, because the Soviet Union is controlled by the Soviet rulers, there is also this revival to Judaism that we find also in the United States. And how does it come into being? It comes into being when a man there, when he describes a dialogue between two men, and one of the men, who is an old communist and is well known, it's in the article, everybody can read it, you can read it too, Rabbi Hecht. He tells there, main thing in Jewish life is the Talmud Torah, the Chinuch, the children, putting on tefillin, observing Shabbos. He says, the communist says so. And the other guy says to him, he says, no, he says, we are all against it. He said, no, he says, if we want to be Jewish communists, the only hope that we have if there are Talmud Torahs and yeshivas. You see, the hope is not Marxism, it's not socialism, it's not the Kremlin, it's not Lenin, it's not Stalin, it's not even Kissinger. It is, and I'm going to publish it. And of course, I think when you have such a material in the newspaper, you can't find it anywhere else. People buy it, and people read it, and they enjoy it. And the most happy saying I always hear about the paper and I'm very proud of it, is that it is a Jewish paper with a Yiddish tam, they say. There are a lot of Jewish newspapers in the world, but they somehow are written in the Jewish language. They're using the Jewish alphabet, but they don't have a Yiddish tam. A Yiddish tam, a Jewish, I don't know how to translate it, perhaps you, Rabbi Hecht, would know better, but it makes you feel great that you are a Jew. Jew is beautiful. Is that one of your then? Yeah?
That's right. That's one of my slogans. Jewish is beautiful. Well, listen, Gershon Jacobson, I'm not going to let you pass up. You've been giving everybody credit for the success of your paper. You forgot about Gershon Jacobson. And I know one thing, that where there is a good, solid head, then the body could be healthy. And no matter how strong a body is, if God forbid the head isn't there, then the body can't do very, very much. And we know of your dedication, your sincerity, and we know of your geschmack. It is a geschmack paper. And it's become a household item because people just enjoy it. Children, I know my own children, always love to run through the Allgemeine and see what they have in it for this week's edition. Incidentally, you're telling us about some of the mail and calls that you had, but I also had some calls, but I didn't know the answer, and I really didn't have time to get to you, Gershon. I'm also a shikl busy mensch. Tell me this. They've been asking me if there's going to be, at any time in the future, are you planning to have an English page? There are some of our younger element who would love to buy. They don't read that too, well, they're not too fluent in Yiddish. However, it's sort of the parents read the Yiddish, but the younger element would like to be able also to be tuned in the English language. Are you have you any such plans, or is this the first time you're listening to this thing?
No, it's not the first time. I think almost from the first week that we began publication, I received many requests, actually, to have at least part of the paper in English, or have an English supplement, to allow also those who are not so fluent in Yiddish to be able to enjoy it. I am planning. I still didn't work out with myself the format, whether it should be a supplement or an additional page or 2 pages or a column. You see, I'm a professional when it comes to journalism, and I don't like to do things on, so to say, auf ein Fuß, on one foot. Things have to be planned properly, you have to have proper staff, and even if it will be in English, I also wanted to have a Yiddish tam, because I am not here to compete with the Jewish press or with about 50 or 60 other Anglo-Jewish newspapers there are, which are, some of them are better or worse. I don't want to criticize, because newspaper is a very, very difficult production. It's a baby that has to be born every week. And a lot goes into it, a lot of work, blood and sweat. So it's in the works. I think very soon the readers will find out, perhaps even the end of this summer, that we are coming up with the Illustrated Weekly, a picture magazine, perhaps in 3 languages, English, Yiddish and Russian. People forget that in New York right now there is quite a community of Russian Jews who have arrived here and who have no connection, no way of information of what's going on in American Jewish life. And I think by putting out a picture magazine of covering weekly major Jewish events with photo, modern journalism, something like a Jewish Life magazine, with no text at all, that the picture should tell the story. To give you an example, we covered the story where you were involved just recently. Nobody else covered it, except in England, some newspapers. But in America, 6 million Jews did not realize that in London took place for the first time a convention of women. The most unusual thing about it was, besides your being as a guest speaker there, the most unusual thing, I think, was that all the chief rebbitzins from all the chief rabbis of Europe were invited and were honored there. From Rebbitzin Jacobowitz from London to the Rebbitzin from other major European cities and countries. And this was not just a convention of women getting together. It was organized by the International or National Council of Lubavitcher women, an organization which I think is last week held a convention right here in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. But this is a gathering in London. It had diplomatic sanction in the sense that the leaders of the thing and you, Rabbi Hecht, as the guest speaker or the main speaker, were received first by the State Department, were given receptions by the American ambassador in London. Many delegates were given receptions by diplomatic missions from all other places, from other countries, France, Belgium, Italy. And in Europe, from what I understand from our correspondents there, they went, they couldn't believe that such a thing is possible, that a group of religious women from all over, with delegates from Minneapolis to Milano to Germany, other countries would gather and speak about not how to raise funds, not how to build another home for the aged, or for orphans, which is the usual talk of such groups, or not how to teach a job for disadvantaged young Jewish men and women. They spoke about the spiritual quality of Jewish life and the role of the women in it. And the content, the unusual gathering, the statements like aura around it, this is what made the story. And the headline in the Allgemeine Journal said that so many and so many women honor so many and so many Rebbetzins from all over. And I know everybody, whomever I met, read it, discussed it, debated it. I had lunch one day in Moshe Peking's restaurant, and the woman comes over to me, she says, you know, I was there, but your story mentioned too many times Rabbi Hecht said, Rabbi Hecht declared, and so forth. He was not a member of our women's club. She took the approach of the women's lib thing. So now people will come to me like last week. I switched on in the radio program on the same WVD station. Dr. Judah Shapira interviewed Dr. Trude Weiss-Rosmarin, and she kind of indicated this that she's not too happy with the Allgemeine Journal. She said, why is she not happy? She said that she doesn't like the idea that the picture of the Lubavitcher Rebbe appears too often on the front page. And she also implied, when I'm surprised, because Dr. Trude Weiss-Rosmarin is a very intelligent woman and who is herself a publisher of a publication, she felt that the Allgemeine is being subsidized, or she knew so, by the Lubavitcher other group. Now, let me tell you here, and now, very categorically, it's not being subsidized by anybody. It's very, very independent. And if Dr. Trude Weiss-Rosmarin would make news as much as the Lubavitcher Rebbe does, she would also find her picture on the front page. In any event, as many times as Dr. Kissinger finds his picture. And I'm not, you know, a lot of people come to me and say, Gershon, is that a Lubavitcher newspaper? I wish it would be, because Lubavitch is big enough of a movement to publish its own paper. But I was told once by a very top Lubavitcher Chosid that it's not the role of Lubavitch to put out a newspaper. Now, it's true the paper covers Lubavitch a great deal, and it will continue so, because I, as an editor, consider Lubavitch a very important news-making movement. And I couldn't care less whether people like it or don't like it. I feel it deserves the coverage. My complaint would be why other newspapers don't do the same. And I don't want to justify. There's a lot of things that in the paper comes out which is not necessarily complementary to Lubavitch. The people who write letters, some of the people who write articles. But take again the issue of Mihu Yehudi. I wrote last week my editorial. The demand to have a law saying that conversions only conducted according to halacha should be accepted in writing down a Jew, a gentle for a Jew, this is not a Lubavitcher issue. As a matter of fact, there's nothing to do with it. It's not even what they call a Lubavitcher Hidur. It's an issue that has to do with Jews. To preserve Jews should be no intermarriages. What has that to do with Lubavitch? The mere fact that Lubavitch Rebbe speaks about it, so it makes news. But you can speak about it, and I can speak about it, and I think conservative rabbis can speak about it, and therefore anybody who is against assimilation of Jews, who wants to have clarity and legal sanctioning that would not mix up our people now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, who should be interested in the law? So people came to the conclusion that since the Lubavitcher Rebbe raises this issue time and again, it's a Lubavitcher issue. It has nothing to do with Lubavitch. Like the question of putting on film, what has that to do with Lubavitch? Film was put on before Lubavitch was even in existence. It was put on just now when the Jews received the Torah 3,000 years ago at Mount Sinai. So I am glad that I have this opportunity to clear this up, because people go around with a misconception which they should not have.
I thank you very much. I should like to say I agree with you. You don't have to apologize for doing such a job. We are proud of the job that you're doing, and I think even your competitors are. If it's anything, it's just a little jealousy that's bothering him, that you seem to be hitting the core of Jewish life and coming out with the issues that they don't have the guts to talk about or don't have the brains to cover. But otherwise, as far as that goes, you're doing all right as far as we are concerned. I should like to tell my audience, ladies and gentlemen, Gershon Jacobson, in addition to this fabulous paper that he's turning out, is also the Israeli correspondent for Yediot Acharonot, which is the largest Israeli daily read by approximately 300,000 Jews in the Holy Land, which gives him, of course, credentials to a great big world, and I think we should all take this into account. Gershon, I have about 1 minute. I want to ask you one question before we get on. Yetzer Hashem, to next week we'll cover some more. But just tell me, how do you have time for all of this?
Well, I think how I have time. My wife and children claim that I'm a slave to this thing, to my profession and so forth. I don't know how I have time. As a matter of fact, I don't have the time. But here is where I come, and I must give all the credit to the Almighty. Usually the job that's done in editing a newspaper that I'm doing is done by at least 4 or 5 men, to read everything that gets in there, to correct it, to order the proper material, to be able to calculate how much reading matter you have and how much advertising and other copy. Takes a great deal of time, but I find time, and the paper is out every week on the dot. It's delivered to the newsstands, it's sold, people are placing ads and getting results. And I find the time, time is such a thing that was also created by God. And apparently He knows how to measure out that from a 24-hour day, one can make at least 48 hours sometimes.
All I can say to you, Gershon, more power to you. God bless you, and keep up your great work. I can only see now why you never have time to sleep. This I can tell you. I have found this out. Ladies and gentlemen, this being the eve of the Sabbath, I should just like to say that lighting of candles will be in Yetzer Hashem tomorrow at 7:50. That means 10 minutes to 8. And Shabbos will be over at 8:59. I also would like to call your attention to the fact that in Yetzer Hashem this coming Monday we'll have another session with Gershon Jacobson, and there are many fascinating topics we haven't covered yet. We didn't have the time. He has so much to tell us. It's a delight to sit and listen to him. I get a personal pleasure out of doing these shows with him. But in the meanwhile, I just would like to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to send in your applications for Camp Amuna, Tiny Tots, Intermediates, and for the college girls as well as for the college boys. And keep writing, keep telephoning, and if you want to get more information, 778-4600. Until Monday night at the same time, may God bless you all.